Happy New Year, everybody! Well, 2016 is upon us, and with that, a new slew of wishes, dreams, and resolutions. Well, one thing we all have in common is that we all wish that Wayland will become a better co-op faction in this coming year. Hopefully, Mumbat Cycle will fix that. For now, though, we'll just focus on what we have right now. We'll I'm This game will feature a lot of the post spin cycle cards. So you're gonna see a Gagarin versus Edward Kim matchup. There's gonna be a lot of both decks rely a lot on Sen cycle cards, uh, Lunar cycle cards, and Order and Chaos cards. So this should be a pretty interesting Wayland versus Anarch matchup. Not necessarily tier 1 decks by either side, but probably something that could see a lot of play once rotation hits. That's the most important part. So just a little fun game here, and we'll see how viable this is. This is the vertical fragmentation Gagarin deck. If you have seen me play it some time ago, I'm reviving it again. We'll see how well this does. I have 2 firewalls on my centrals, followed by a Tollbooth on the remote. Tollbooth on the remote works pretty well in this deck because firstly I ran Ash, which means that the opponent will be taxed, credit taxed to Oblivion, and more importantly, it makes it very hard to trash my root in there once I actually find my copy of the root. My opponent gets off to a fantastic start. He has money, and most importantly, he has his card draw engine. Chronotype outside by turn 2 is nothing to scoff at. This probably means he will win the game, unless I can rush out, which is pretty difficult for me, considering he has so many credits and that I don't have any good agendas in my hand. I should probably attempt to pump out the Atlas with a counter on it, but I chose not to, as you will soon see. I do have a solid amount of money, but this means nothing because, most importantly, I need to be very wary of the fact that all my eyes cost so much money to res. So, resing a firewall and Tollbooth basically eats up my entire credit bank, which I cannot afford. So I think I'm just looking to stabilize here by getting the root set up. I'm going to shuffle in the hedge funds here because I want to see them again. And since I haven't found the root, I'm just going to score the Atlas right now. My opponent installs Desperado, which is a very bad news for me. Not only does this give him efficiency on centrals, most importantly, it negates my ID ability on remotes, more or less. Which is pretty unfortunate, not much I can do about that. At least I get 2 points going straight away. He still hasn't found any breakers. Well, that changes things. Faust is incredibly good against Wayland, because while Wayland's eyes tend to be pretty high strength, they are pretty easily countered by David, and Faust can still get through in a pinch. So this, ideally right now, I would actually attempt to score the Old Town renovation, but I know I can't do that right now, because with Faust he can easily get through Tollbooth with his credit pool, and I don't have Ash to protect the server. Otherwise, I would definitely have attempted to score the Oak Town here. The Faust on the table just changes everything. And now the ice destruction begins. Fork, Knife, Spoon are part of the cutlery set, which came out in Order and Chaos, and my opponent is using it to pretty big advantage. The knife is going to destroy the firewall to all hell, and he can actually access a card after that because he's not using Ether. So I'm in a bit of a pickle right here. What on earth do I do? He did trash 1 copy of my Ash, so that's not something I want to see. I do find my root, but it's a bit too late because my Breaker Bay grid server is occupied by public support, so I can't actually get my root going, which is a pain. And my opponent has the same old thing on the board, which I should be really conscious about, because if I attempt to res any more barriers, they are going to get knifed down immediately. I'm talking about the firewall on HQ. That is something I should not try to res. He goes for the parasite on my ice wall and kills it with Data Sucker. There's nothing I can do about that. Once again, my R&D is wide open. Time to fix that. Where's my ice? There's no ice. He destroyed all of it. Well, the firewall's the next best thing, so I'm just gonna put it on R&D. I have to. There's no choice. I know that it's so vulnerable to getting knifed, but I have no choice because my opponent has medium counters. And I see my savior, Archer. Archer is one of the main reasons to play Wayland now, and I'm going to take advantage of that. That Archer is going to do a lot of work until he finds his David. Before he finds his David, he's going to lose his entire hand running to my Archer, and he's about to do that right now. Alright, so just as the public support got scored, I can forfeit it to the Archer. So minimal losses and maximum loss for my opponent. Don't get me wrong, he can still get through, although I don't think he will. He's just going to chuck enough cards to prevent program crashes and end the run. He has the option of letting the entire archer fire, which I think would be a mistake. If I get to fire the archer here, I think I would take down the Faust and the Data Sucker. Reason being, I can definitely see him doing something really nasty to my archer, and I want to remove his ability to break the archer on the same turn as far as possible. So with that said, I think the best move here for me would be to trash his Faust and Data Sucker, so that he will have a very difficult time getting in again with his breakers. Because he'll have to clone chip the Faust, and this means he has to spend 4 cards, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 cards to get through the archer, or 6 cards to break the entire archer, which is his entire hand. Now, there's a very neat trick that Enox can do at this point. With Faust, you can actually raise Faust strength to 4 by pitching a David from your hand. Then you use clone chip to revive that David, and use the David to break the archer subroutines instead. So your Faust is at strength 4, which is useless, but the main point is to get rid of the David in your hand so you can install it during the run with clone chip. That's a possible line of play, but my opponent clearly did not have David in his hand. So basically at this point, he's forced to chuck 3 cards from his hand. Because he doesn't want to get hit by the program crashes. So by chucking 3 cards from his hand, he can break 2 subroutines with a Faust at strength 4, and using 2 sucker counters to suck down my archer. That's what he has to do. Right now he's just taking a long time because he has no idea what to chuck. He decides to chuck Parasite, which is good to see. It means less ice destruction for me. He chucks another Parasite and an I've Had Worse. Well, he trashes the David from his hand. So that's very interesting. He did not actually use the David. I think he should have used the David to break the archer, as I mentioned earlier, in that fashion, but he doesn't want to apparently, for some unknown reason. We'll get to that later. Meanwhile, I sneak out a Naked Atlas on the table, because I'm pretty sure he's not going to run it this turn. Although he really should be checking my remotes every single turn, because it doesn't cost him anything, now that he has so much money. So here's his plan. He wants to Parasite down the archer, and go for the fork. So now he's gonna break the archer using Mimic instead of David, so he can so he doesn't really want to use David at all, and I'm forced to keep him out with Firewall. He won't get kept out, he can get through if he wants to, but he chooses not to. Because yeah, he can knife me through right now. With same old thing and knife in the heap, he can definitely knife through my Firewall, but he chooses to wait one more turn. And really at this point I should be icing up R&D so that he cannot knife my R&D, but I can't because I have no ice anyway. So the next best thing I can do is score the Atlas and wait for my impending doom. He installs another copy of David and goes for the knife, using same old thing. This looks familiar. My R&D is blank once again. It's completely porous, and he's gaining 1 credit and 1 sucker counter and 1 medium counter every time he runs. I'm in a lot of trouble. A lot of trouble. Better do something about that. Hello Caduceus, you're useless right now. Here's a Mimic on the board. Builder, you came far too late. That builder would have done a lot of work on R&D. Sure, he would have still knifed through my firewalls with David counters, but, well, at least that is something, right? The builders come out of order. That's the worst thing about builder. Even though it's a strong and cheap code gate, the problem is it is so dependent on draw order. If you draw your builders and your walls at the wrong time, you get punished like that, where the builder just sits in your hand doing nothing. It could have been another piece of ice, it could have been a hive, could have been a spider web, but no, it's a useless builder. And it's going to cost me a lot of trouble because my opponent's just slamming through my R&D for 1 credit a run, which is way too cheap for him, and gets a Liberator accounts down to mock me further. I try to get another public support going. This means that I can score 3 Atlases and win. My root is continuously ticking down, which is good. He hasn't attempted to contest my root, which means that I'm actually gaining a lot of credits from free installs and free ice reses. Looking at my hand, the only good piece of ice is Enigma, which is not good at all because I'm pretty sure he has a Yelp somewhere, and Faust doesn't take more than 2 cards to break through the Enigma. not on a last click run anyway, which he is doing right now. So it only costs him a card and a credit to get through my R&D. That is really, really pathetic. Why don't you play Wayland? They have very pathetic eyes. It just is that way. And Edward Kim's ability finally comes into play for the very first time in the game by trashing a hedge fund. Well, it is not a very good ID. Make no mistake about it. And he eats up my Atlas, so the dream of winning via Atlas is gone. Tollbooth has to go on R&D at this point, and yeah, there's very little I can do. I'm basically treading water right now, trying to ensure that there's always at least one unrest eyes on R&D. And he knows the Tollbooth is coming, so I show it to him formally. Now I cannot defend my route, and I get to sap 3 credits from him, but that's useless because he top decks a Spoon and kills my Tollbooth as soon as I res it. This deck is brutal. Fork Knife and Spoon are awful, but they do so much work. They are pretty amazing cards. I mean, they're pretty good with Ether, but with Foul it gets ridiculous, and with Wildside Chronotype, you just draw into them so quickly, and I immediately lose. Turns out my opponent was running Abram Jobs deck, which he has published on his website, Run the Net. Speaking of which, his website is very informative. It contains a lot of high-level insight and analysis, unlike anything I've seen before. And that includes the articles that are pumped out by the Steam Hack community. So I strongly recommend anyone even remotely serious about the game of Netrunner to read his articles, because he sheds a lot of light onto this game and makes you consider cards, decks, and gameplay from a very different perspective, which is very refreshing. So his idea is that the cutlery set is vastly underrated, which it is. I mean, Ice Destruction, come on, Parasite is one of the strongest cards in the game. These things do the exact same thing. They really should be seeing more play, and indeed, they are very powerful, especially in the current climate where lots of people are running food codes with Chrysium Grid. It just is the way, because these cutlery set break Bioroids very easily. Because you spend clicks to break Bioroids, you can easily click through Bioroids to kill them, nullifying the corpse economy and defenses without needing a gear check of your own. Isn't that amazing? And to make things better, you run Desperado and Data Sucker to just snowball out of control, as my opponent did. This is a rather terrifying deck to play against once you get set up, because as you saw, I just couldn't keep up the defenses, which is ridiculous. He was destroying my eyes faster than I could lay it on R&D. And he wasn't even remotely pressuring any of my other servers, which is a very bad sign. If you can't even defend a single server, you're probably very screwed as a corp. And indeed I was this game. So this is a very strong deck. I think it's pretty well suited in this climate, especially because it's not reliant on cards like Account Siphon, Apocalypse, etc., which are nullified by Chrysium Grid, which very few runners have solutions to right now. This deck is all about Ice Destruction combined with just pure run pressure, and it works very well. I do not agree with the ID choice. I think this works way better in Valencia because you get the added remote pressure and you double your efficiency of runs because you run Desperado and have a bad publicity to work with. So that's my thoughts on the deck, but it's very powerful. And clearly, this Gagarin deck is merely a tier 2 deck that's no match for any of the stronger runner decks, which is unfortunate, but that's where Wayland is right now. So please join me in making a 2016 wish for Wayland. Hope they get better cards, whether to enable their kill combo or to enable Glacier play, because Wayland really needs to see more play at the top tier of competition. Thanks for watching Happy Net Running. See you very soon.